Hi, hello, and welcome back to this episode of Geography Girl. And today I want to talk to you about the medieval map that terrified Europe. In around the year 1300, in a small English cathedral city, a scribe sketched out the world on an enormous piece of calfskin. It was more than 1.5 meters wide, and he began to draw the world. He drew it not just how merchants described it or sailors saw it, but how Europeans believed it to be. The result is the Hereford Mappa Mundi, the largest surviving medieval world map, and one of the biggest and one of the most extraordinary medieval pieces of propaganda to come out of the Middle Ages. It is a map where Jerusalem sits at the centre because medieval Christians believed that the world revolved around salvation. It is a world where monsters guard the fringes, because the edges of the world were believed to be morally dangerous. And it is a map where biblical events are displayed alongside real cities. To understand the Mappa Mundi is to understand how medieval Europeans interpreted space, identity, morality and power. And so we need to look at the world how they saw it. What is the Mappa Mundi and why does it exist? Hereford Mappa Mundi was created in around 1300, probably under the supervision of Richard of Haldingham and Sleaford, a canon of Hereford Cathedral. It is housed today in the same cathedral and is one of the rare medieval artefacts still in its original institutional home. At its most basic, the Mappa Mundi is a TO map, a medieval type of map where the world is divided into 3 continents: Asia, Europe and Africa, separated by a T-shaped arrangement of the Mediterranean, the Nile and the Don rivers, all enclosed by a circular ocean. But this map is far more elaborate than most. It contains over 500 labelled features: cities, people, biblical scenes, mythological creatures, natural landmarks and classical references. The whole thing is less of a geographical tool and more of an encyclopedia of a medieval worldview. If we think about why medieval maps look so strange to modern eyes, it's because they served a totally different purpose. Medieval Europe inherited 3 main knowledge traditions. There was biblical cosmology, Genesis, Noah's Ark, the Eden and Exodus. There was classical geography from Pliny the Elder or Isidore of Seville, and there were travel narratives from crusaders and pilgrims and merchants, although Marco Polo had not yet circulated widely the map that he had drawn, but earlier accounts did exist. In this worldview, the East is of a spiritual origin, and so Eden is placed at the top. Jerusalem is at the centre of the world because it is the site of Christ's death and resurrection, and the edges are the dangerous places, often populated with monstrous races. For medieval Europeans, space was moralised. Modern scholars like Peter Barbara and Scott Westrom, which is the author of the definitive Mappa Mundi study, have shown that medieval maps explained the world rather than described it. They placed an emphasis on theological truth, not empirical accuracy. The Mappa Mundi therefore reflects medieval anxieties, ambitions, religious priorities and geographical fears. Let's explore this idea of the monsters at the edge. And this is a long-used propaganda tool. These are largely drawn from classical and early Christian sources like Pliny, Silenus and Isidore. These include the cynocephale, which is the dog-headed man, depicted in India, which was common in medieval law and mentioned by St. Augustine. It symbolised non-Christians who were seen as morally distant. There are sciapods, a one-legged man with a giant foot used as a shade. These are placed near both Ethiopia and India and were to symbolise sloth and bodily excess. And the blemier, which is a headless man with faces in their chest. These are also from Pliny, and they symbolised humanity without divine order. There were dragon heads and giant serpents, which were placed in Arabia, Ethiopia and India, and symbolised spiritual peril and the unknown. These were not decorative. These served a political and cultural purpose. By placing them beyond the boundaries of Christendom, the map reinforced the idea that the inside is civilization and God's order and the outside is chaos. This was effective propaganda. It discouraged Europeans from travelling outside beyond known trade routes and reinforced Christian cultural boundaries. And this was a continent where literacy was limited, so visual storytelling was one of the most powerful forms of cultural control. Biblical geography, mapping the Christian cosmos. The Mappa Mundi is also a biblical atlas. For example, the Garden of Eden is shown at the very top of the map, surrounded by a ring of fire. Noah's Ark is drawn landing on Mount Ararat in Armenia. Tower of Babel sits on Mesopotamia, representing human pride and divine punishment. Red Sea is coloured red, visually reinforcing the Exodus story. The route of the Israelites is traced from Egypt to Canaan. This blend with biblical narrative is not naive, it was purposeful to reinforce the idea that history was linear and divinely guided, Jerusalem was literally the centre of God's plan, and that Christian scripture explained the physical world. In theological teaching, maps like the Mappa Mundi served as a visual catechism. They were used in sermons and public readings to educate the faithful. There were also political messages of crusades, authority, and European identity. The Mappa Mundi is full of political meaning. It's important to remember that it was produced in an era that was defined by crusades, Christian expansion, and anxiety about Islam. In terms of Crusader geography, Jerusalem's placement at the centre is not the oldest tradition. It arises in the 12th and 13th century, when crusading was at its height. Maps like this help to justify the Crusaders' worldview. Jerusalem being central means that it is spiritual and literally important. The Holy Land is the axis of the Mundi, meaning that it must be recovered or defended, and surrounding lands are showed as dangerous and morally inferior. It also shows the authority of church and crown, reflecting the medieval belief in a world structured by hierarchy, monitoring, and heaven. The map legitimizes Christian rulers by placing them with divine order. Biblical kings sit alongside real ones, Christian empires appear at the civilized center, and pagan rulers are pushed outwards. The map also subtly reinforces European identity. Europe is drawn as compact and easily recognisable. Christendom is visually distinct from its monstrous margins, and cultural unity is implied through landmarks, saints, and cities. This is important because it was actually at a time where Europe was politically fragmented. Maps like the Mappa Mundi promoted a sense of collective unity under Christianity. What the map gets wrong and why this is the point. If you look at the map with modern eyes, Africa is distorted, Asia is enormous, Britain is strangely large and clearly drawn. Rivers run in odd directions, and the Mediterranean is strangely compressed. These were choices rather than mistakes. Maps of this period follow a symbolic accuracy rather than an empiric one. This is why Asia, the site of paradise, biblical history, and ancient civilization, is massive. Britain, which is the map's cultural origin point, appeared very clearly, and the East is at the top because that is where salvation began. These distortions are not ignorant, but they reflect ideology. So what was the socio-cultural impact of this map? Did it change behaviour? The Mappa's Mundi influenced Europeans in several ways. The fear of the known strengthened isolation. The monsters did discourage long-range travel, reinforced the idea that the world beyond Christendom was dangerous. It influenced the shape of pilgrimage culture. The map provided a spiritual layout of the world, reinforcing pilgrim routes, not just by showing distances, but showing the divine geography leading to Jerusalem, Rome, Compostela, and Canterbury. The clergy would use the map for education and moral teaching. They would use it in sermons to illustrate lessons. For many people, the map might have been the only visual representation of the world that they ever saw. The map helped to shape a shared medieval European imagination, where the world was ordered, God's plan was visible, European is morally central, and the periphery is a dangerous concept. The map influenced diplomacy, trade, missionary work, and social attitudes. Of the Mappa Mundi era, the age of exploration. By the late 15th century, the Mappa Mundi worldview began to collapse. Portuguese explorers reached West Africa's coast from the 1430s onwards. Bartholomew Dias rounded the Cape in 1488. Columbus crossed the Atlantic in 1492, and Vasco da Gama reached India by sea in 1498. Sailors returned with information that contradicted this classical medieval lore. So monsters began to be replaced by coastlines. Paradise vanished from the map and Jerusalem shrank. Over the years, measurement started to replace symbolism. And so the world became larger, more complex, interconnected, and empirically known. Why does the Mappa Mundi still matter? It has become a really interesting snapshot of a pre-globalized world. Today, the Hereford Mappa Mundi is one of the greatest surviving artifacts of medieval thought. It shows us how people understood themselves, what they feared, how they justified power, how religion shaped the interpretation of space, and how maps act as cultural artifacts, not just neutral tools. Even now, modern maps do carry biases. The Mercator projection distorts landmasses, placing Europe near the centre and making Africa look smaller. This is a legacy of colonial mapping. And political maps will often emphasise borders that are historically recent. And that's it for today's episode. I really hope you liked this look at the gorgeous and wonderful Hereford Mappa Mundi. If you like this episode, give us a like and subscribe for more because I bring out new episodes every Tuesday. Okay, thank you, goodbye.